All right.
Recording in progress.
Okay, welcome everyone. It is Wednesday, October 20th. This is at 5:32. This is a special meeting of the Norwich Selectboard.
Sorry.
How are we now? We're good?
Sorry.
We were announced, but those were fireworks after I made that announcement of our special of the date. Okay, so my name is Roger Arnold. I am here in Tracy Hall. I am joined by Roger, his interim town manager, and Miranda Bergmeyer, his assistant. COTV is here. Cheryl Lindbergh, our treasurer, is with us in the audience. I'm joined by Mary Layton, Rob Gear, Claudette Brochu, and Marcia Calloway remotely. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion?
I move to approve the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Marcia. Any discussion? Okay. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, unanimous. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is select board, or public and select board comment. Are there any members of the public, either virtually or that would like to make a comment for something that's not on the agenda? Okay. Seeing none, are there any select board comments? Okay, great. So then the item on the agenda is, so let me just introduce this a little bit and then I'm going to turn it immediately over to Rod. So at our last meeting, 13th, last week, I had sort of rhetorically suggested to this group that we may want to think about ways that to support the town manager's office, given that we will not have an interim town manager being brought in necessarily. And I said not based on the assumption really that we had reached out to the LCT and Municipal Resources Inc. Looking for interim assistance, and these are, from what I understand, sort of the typical entity folks in our region go to. So anyway, given that we would be continuing to capably be in the hands of Rod Francis as interim, that we would like to think about how to support that office. And so I posed that same rhetorical point to our folks in that office, and they had some ideas, and one of which is more time sensitive than others, and so I wanted us to hear about that this evening, and you all graciously allowed for this special meeting. So that being said, I'm going to actually go there's one specific idea I wanted to talk about for tonight. We'll hear probably more at our next regularly scheduled meeting, but so I'm going to turn it over actually to Rod to sort of introduce the context for this request, and then what would need to be done based on what our reception is to the idea. How's that sound? Is that okay? Any questions? Maybe I didn't. I think I framed that correctly enough. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Rod.
Good evening, everyone.
Will the owl move?
The owl seems to not, but it's also pointing at me. I'll just let them catch up. So wake up the owl. So Miranda and I have spent some time thinking about this request, and I should say that we're very grateful that the board is open to considering making some modifications. We spent time thinking about the ways in which our work could be parceled out into discrete projects, and what was the most pressing in that regard, and what was the most time consuming. The first and most obvious work project that is very time consuming is the production of the town report. I'm not sure how many of you know what's involved in pulling the town report together, but it's surprisingly complicated with regard to the number of moving pieces, because each entity that receives support from the town of Norwich writes a brief description of their activities for the benefit of Norwich voters, and then each department does something similar, and then your town department does something similar, and then each board, commission, or committee or subcommittee does something similar. And so each one of those entries, even if it's only just a couple of paragraphs long, involves a relationship between whoever's trying to pull the report together and the person responsible for that text. And so it's literally dozens, if not, 100 people. And then there's hard deadlines to do with it being ready for town meeting. And then there's hard deadlines associated with the printer for them to print it in time for it to be ready for town meeting. In years past, Miranda has been very thoughtful and engaged in the process, and really good at herding all these cats, and has worked really well with Jean Law. And for reasons that I don't want to go into right now, Jean Law won't be available this year, and so the institutional knowledge and experience and background that has made the project doable in previous years is not available. And then Miranda's got a lot of other things that are more pressing and suit her skill set better in terms of her contribution to the town manager's office, given what else we've got on. So we think that this is a project that can be made discreet and given to somebody with a background in editing and project coordination. And so we're asking for a project coordinator for the town report. And we calculate that it will initially be around 2 days a week on this task, and that will ramp up to almost full-time for a brief period of time in the December timeframe. And then once the copy has gone off to the printers, that'll basically be the end of it. In a related fashion, one of the things that only 3 staff for the town have the ability, that is the skills and the access to the town website, to post agendas, minutes, meeting notes, and other materials that are necessary to comply with open meeting law. That's myself, Miranda, and Pam Mullen from the planning office. And we calculated that just meeting the OML requirements for public warnings and notices takes Miranda and I, the two of us, probably spend at least half a day a week devoted to this one exercise. And that's in a simple week or in a week where there's no other additional meetings. Each time you post an agenda, you confront a pretty tedious and complicated interface with the updated web page. If everything goes right, you'll do it in 40 minutes. So one piece of paper, if you like, getting posted to the web page, and then pushed out to the listserv is sort of a series of steps that takes about 40 minutes. We would like the town report project coordinator person, if possible, to have skills to do the same work, and we think that there's an overlap there in terms of the skills, and that they would have that task in addition to pulling the town report together. And we calculate that that would be in the arena of half a day to a day a week, partly because we can also think of giving them, if you like, virtual cleanup activities. So getting into the backside of the web page and sorting it out and cleaning it up, partly in preparation for a redesigned web page, which is also badly overdue. So those are the 2 tasks that we've identified so far. We've got more to offer on other tasks that might require more thought and consideration on your part and ours, but we think that these 2 initial tasks that could be combined into the duties of one person are worth discussing now.
Okay, I think that was great. That was very clear. Thank you, Rod. So let's discuss it now. Do any board members have any questions for Rod about his outline, what he just outlined, what the proposal was for us to consider? And I guess I would want to also say that in a normal situation, the town manager's office would have the discretion to make some of these staffing decisions. But I think it's in this interim period, I thank Rod for bringing it to us, bringing it to our attention and asking for our involvement and feedback, right? But go ahead, anyone? Mary?
I think they're very reasonable requests, and I think they're clearly defined. I'd like to have some idea of just the total hours required, even a rough sense, like it's a good start to say that each posting of a meeting is 40 minutes, but if it could be just multiplied out, so are we talking about, what kind of schedule are we talking about? What kind of total hours? But I think it's very good. I think it's, it's clerical. I mean, you do need people with special skills, like for the town report, almost like publishing skills. But on the other hand, I think Rod and Miranda have other aspects of their job that require specialized judgment. So that I think this could be handed off pretty nicely.
Thank you, Mary. Rod noted that question, but let's hear from everyone before we answer your question. Anyone else? Go ahead, Marcia.
So do I understand that there was a person who did most of this and we now don't have that person?
No, that person, so I'll let them answer, but Miranda was this person. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, Marcia, the town report, I was always the one who compiles it. But I also, as Rod mentioned, I used to have the really invaluable assistance of Jean Law, so she did all of the editing. There was that, but I think it's mostly this request is being made now, not so much because the person who used to do all of that is gone, but there isn't anybody to do a big chunk of it, and then also other things happening. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, what are the other things that are pressing too at the same time?
So Marcia, your question is, can you repeat your question for us?
Sure. Rod had said Miranda has work that's more pressing. And so I understand the half-day requirements for the open meeting law stuff, and that's just normal, not for extra special meetings like this. But I'm just wondering, trying to gauge this, if before you were doing the bulk of it and you had someone to help you with the editing, and now you want someone to help with, are you expecting to hand off the whole project? Are you expecting to oversee it? Is it more like you're replacing the editor person that you had, or do you want them to do more? And if you are replacing and wanting them to do more, then I'm wondering what has increased in your workload that's, putting so much pressure on. And I understand this is a pressurized situation.
Right, so you're looking for maybe some specificity outside of the fact that the town manager's office is also the planning office and the DPW office is yeah.
I think we have to, in our mind, remember we've got separate offices, and just because we have more than one task being done by one individual, we have to still continue to look at them like separate offices. So in terms of separate offices, the town manager's office that Miranda was working completely with, have there been additional things there, or is it bleed over from the things that have come into the office with Rod.
Okay, Rod, have you taken note of sort of Marcia's questions?
I think I've got a sense of Marcia's
Okay.
question. Do you
So-
want me to have a?
I want to go to Rob and Claudette, so that way, because I saw you write down Mary's, you're writing down Marcia's. I want to hear from Rob and Claudette, and then we'll do a round of answers to the questions, if that's okay. Was that all your questions or comments, Marcia, or did you have more?
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. Claudette or Rob, any comments or questions?
I can see the need for the assistance, and I would assume, I could be wrong about this, but I would assume that Miranda's job was somewhere in the neighborhood of 110% before the change. So it seems justified to me.
Thank you, Rob. Claudette?
I also think it's justified. I'm wondering, will the salary come out of the town manager's line item?
Right, where's the money coming from? Okay,
Right.
great. So Rod's noted that. Anything else, Claudette, or should we then take on the sets of questions? Okay, cool. So Rod, why don't you start with Mary's question, which was, what is the sort of, how many hours a week is this position envisioned?
So, good question, Mary. Miranda and I have been talking about this and think that having one part-time person, the idea here is to try and find one part-time person with the skills to do both these tasks, and that it would be in the range of two to 3 days a week initially, and then it would ramp up as we get closer to the finalization of the town report, when the editing work becomes really much more significant. But the web and the web posting agendas, minutes, and other items to the web would probably start off being a little greater than half a day a week because of them familiarizing themselves with the software and so forth, but hover around that while they were involved with the larger project. And so we're thinking, yeah, 2.5 to 3 days a week.
And as a follow-up to that, actually, if I may, I guess I may, is there envisioned?
What we would hope to say there is that one hard end date would be the town report going to the printer. So that's a pretty firm end date for that component. And then what we would hope is that while this person was also working on the web page, we, as a body, the select board and the staff would work through the questions of what it would take to have the web page rebuilt, as it were, what that would cost and what that would look like and what that would involve. That's a large project in its own right that would then engage staff, particularly Miranda again, in its design and so forth. So we think that might bleed into that depending on the timing, but we think that the obvious end date is filing the town report with the printers.
Okay, great. And then Marcia asked, I think Marcia's questions were more around what will this make available in Miranda's schedule, is like one sort of related question that I picked up on. And then you took notes on some of Marcia's other questions. So let's have you start to answer them, and then I'll ask Marcia for clarification.
Right, and I'm happy for Miranda to join me in this answer, but I'm going to start off if that's okay. So right now, Miranda's range of tasks and duties, I think, go well outside what might normally be expected to be the assistant to the town manager role. And so I'm not sure how many of the select board members are aware of the scope of Miranda's contribution. So Miranda is the de facto HR manager for the entire town. In the budget process, what that means in particular is paying attention to the benefits package and the change in the nature and structure of the benefits package and whatever budgetary considerations come out of that. So monitoring that, engaging with that. Miranda's also the person that onboards new staff and manages existing staff's questions around all HR issues, including the benefits package and salaries. As you may have noticed, we've got a lot of HR activity, arguably more HR activity than we're accustomed to, and that's always been fairly high. And so that also means that Miranda is the sole source of institutional knowledge about how all those things are done and where those things are located. And so it has a pivotal role there in onboarding new staff, offboarding, leaving staff, making those transitions, interviewing candidates for open positions, advertising those positions, and so forth. So we've had a lot of activity in that arena. And then beyond that, I am maintaining 2 separate offices, largely, two physically different spaces. I have an assistant in planning and zoning that works part-time, and I have Miranda as an assistant for the town manager's office. I maintain a kind of a split personality where I try and not be a planning and zoning administrator when I'm being a town manager and vice versa.
Right.
It's fairly effective. I tend to be a planning and zoning administrator at night or sometimes on the weekend, and town manager during the week, and try and stay on top of the most pressing issues in both regards. I try as much as possible to work with the staff in each of those different offices to maximize what we're actually doing. So I think we've done fairly well at maintaining that separation, and I literally physically go from one space to the other to actually do that.
Okay.
I'm, of course, people can find me in one room or another and things cross over or whatever, but generally the separation is maintained. Miranda's role as the assistant to the town manager, in the absence of having a town manager sitting there all the time, is often around backfilling what happens when I'm, doing something else. And she's also the institutional memory for how the office works, where things are on the server, where things physically are in the office, where various things come from, what the history is with various projects and issues. And so, if you like, spends a lot of time training me as the interim town manager on the questions of the day, which is, again, arguably not a role, but it is actually the way we're surviving.
It's what's happening.
So it's what's happening. The reality is that's what's happening. And so there's an added level of friction for both of us in finding out how things, what things are urgent, how to get things done, and how to move things forward. And again, we're in budget season, which means that there's additional demands in that regard, in terms of the way it's been done in the past, where the information is, and so forth. So I think that I think, Masha, I've attempted to answer both your questions. And what I'd say there is that the additional workload for Miranda in terms of doing the town report, particularly without the assistance of a volunteer editor, is so daunting given her existing set of duties and her workload, that we're asking for this assistance now. And what's appealing about offloading, if you like, the town report as a set of duties is that it's a discrete project. Right. We can turn it into a discrete project where there's other things that we cannot do that for Miranda's work.
Okay. Marcia, any more context? I appreciate the question about sort of the offices, right? And anything?
Yeah, it sounds to me like this probably should have been regularized as a line item previously, and that rather than expecting somebody to do it as a volunteer basis, it would be a good thing to just have on board for that particular project going forward.
Yeah, I think I totally agree, and I'm seeing some nods.
I agree.
And Rod agrees.
I think
With the caveat, I would say that Miranda sort of is heavily supervising, because if you've got the knowledge, you know, that you should be watching what they're doing.
So I think, Marsha, if you're into other towns, many towns, people, other towns that I've worked in, see the production of the town report as something that they can participate in, that they've got a set of skills and a set of, and kind of an interest in the product, because it's a definitive product, it's a real thing that you can pick up.
Yeah.
And they really like that. And so that it's frequently kind of a venue for volunteer activity that has its own costs in a way, which is that you're now organizing a bunch of volunteers.
Yeah.
And its own set of skills associated with that. I think that the one virtue of having Jean Law for so many years was that she was extremely skilled at what she did, and she was very dedicated, and so that it ran very smoothly. But I think that Miranda's really, and she can speak for herself, I don't want to put words in her mouth always, but I think Miranda and I are both looking at this and just going, I don't know how we're going to get this done with everything else that we've got on. I guess is the, and I think you're right to point to it being something that is a set of professional tasks that could be contracted out as long as there's adequate supervision. And I think that Miranda is happy to be able to do that.
Yes, anything to add, Miranda, before we get to that last question about money? Or
No, I think Rod expressed it well. I think there's, with the fact that Rod is getting up to speed with things, it points to those areas that were more or less on autopilot, you know,
Right.
that as you know, Rod put it, that I'm the institutional knowledge, I'm
Right.
I'm in.
Right. It's true.
You know, I'm the one, so if nothing, there's very little that happens in the office right now that I am not involved with.
Right.
Whereas that did not used to be true.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I'm seeing nods from folks. I don't know if you see that on that computer, but okay. And then Claudette's question was just, how will we pay for this? Is there a budget line available to transfer from?
I'm going to identify that it would be the town manager's salary line. So we're not expending that at this point.
Right.
And so we're not suggesting that we expend all of it on this, but so that I believe that there's some funds available.
Okay. And then we can expect sort of proof in the pudding at a later date, I imagine, right?
Yes.
Can't believe I used that expression, but you understand what I meant.
I actually don't understand that. Does that mean determining an hourly rate or something like that, or what?
Sort of see the benefit of sort of the fiscal proof, sort of that we have the available funds. But I think right now we're hearing that the town manager line is a logical source, and that we're aware that there's funds to draw from, and we'll see sort of the numbers at a future meeting, perhaps.
Right. May I ask another question? Just in thinking about the types of skills involved, is it reasonable to think that there's a typical hourly rate for a person who does this sort of work? It would be sort of like a person who does, I don't know, desktop publishing or something like that.
I'm sure there is a going rate, and I don't know it off the top of my head, so that one of the questions that Miranda and I both have is what would be the going rate?
Sure. Mhm. I'm sure there is one, or a range. So that would be nice to know. Yeah.
Sort of, sorry.
To the pudding. When we get to the pudding, those are the raisins that I want to know about. Okay.
Thank you for going with my metaphor, Mary. And that's exactly when we have like that rate, right? We'll be able to have the benefit of that line items funds.
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or for this, folks? As I said, there will be space on October 27th for, sort of additional requests that we'll be hearing from, but this had some time sensitivity, which is why we're talking about this discrete ask right now. Okay, if there's no discussion, I have a public comment. Go ahead, Cheryl Lindbergh.
So Cheryl Lindbergh,
Can you-
59 Cox Road. May I just ask if currently Rod's getting split between the town manager line item for wages and his planning and zoning, is that being allocated somehow, or is it all going to one or the other? Is there an answer that's easy on that?
So I guess the question is like, how is your additional compensation being made or being allocated? Do you have?
It's a little bit theoretical right now because it actually hasn't started yet.
Is that right?
Yes, right. It will come to you for approval, I think, at the next select board meeting. So it'll be in the next payroll. But so my understanding and my explanation would be that the difference between the pay rate I expect to receive as interim town manager and my pay rate as planning and zoning director, that difference would come from the town manager's salary line.
Right. And our agreement is backdated to the 31st.
Right.
So, okay.
Right. But that would still leave a significant amount of room in the town manager's salary line, particularly if you include benefits, to support retaining somebody under contract for a number of hours in a week that is less than what they would be a contract employee and they wouldn't be qualifying for benefits.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you for your question, Cheryl.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, there's a motion that I would love for someone to make.
I move to authorize the interim town manager to write the job description for a project coordinator and to solicit applications for the position.
Is there a second? Okay, seconded by Rob, made by Mary. Any further discussion? Go ahead, Marcia.
Do we need to say anything about the time duration or anything like that? It's pretty open-ended.
It is. So are you, would you like to make an amendment to the motion?
I don't have it in, let's see.
Say
You can say, you can
through the
just,
completion of the town report.
we could just say through the completion of the town report has been the suggestion from Miranda.
So moved.
Okay, great. Is there, yes. Is there a second on that amendment? Okay, second, go ahead. Claudette second, Claudette has a comment, not a second.
Yeah, I guess I'm, instead of through the completion of the town report, which would be, I'm guessing January-ish timeframe, I would suggest that it continue until we have a new town manager.
I appreciate that, Claudette. That's what I had sort of thought in my conversations in preparing for this agenda item. I don't know. And that is slated to be February.
Or why don't we just say March 1?
Yeah. Yeah.
Rod, do you have thoughts on that?
I think that it would be better if we could at least allow for this to last as long as the new town manager is appointed. And so March 1. I mean, yeah, you could say March 1, I think. You may want to include, depending on the outcome of finding a new town manager, you may want to include in the motion the ability to extend it as needed or something such as that.
So we have a couple of suggestions. So we're hearing March 1, you could, or we could say until a town manager, you can say, you can give a date with the opportunity for extension. There's a couple of ways we can amend this.
I would suggest March 1 with the possibility of an extension from there. If we
Okay.
don't need an extension, then we don't extend. If we need an extension, then we bring it back to the table and talk about it.
Okay, Marcia, how do you feel about that? Go ahead.
It's not that I feel negatively about that, but I'm just wondering, once the town report is done, let's say it's done January 31st, we've given the authorization, but I'm not sure how that would play into a contract. So if the person was going to stay for another 2 months, do they have something that they can do?
Well, they would continue to be posting the committee meetings and minutes, and so their time would be reduced back down to, you know, less time. But yes, they would. That's always here, that work.
Okay,
Yeah, and it's more like 1 month, Marsha, I think, in terms of the timeline for the production of the printed finished report comes out in the middle of February.
Yeah, I want to say that it has to be at the printer within the first week of February.
Yes, and then the only thing I'll say too, this would subject to be a contract or some kind of agreement. So I imagine we would be able to have some eyes on, you know, something before someone is hired, right? So right now we're discussing, you know, a job description based on the contents of our conversation, right? And when we go to hire, you know, obviously contracts need things like dates and work description. We'll have an opportunity to review that, if that helps. Rob, I see. Well, Marcia, do you have a follow-up to that, or?
just to follow up, that maybe it could be just specified in the contract that it's an at-will employment, you know, with the intention of doing X, Y, and Z, and with the possibility of extension as needed.
Sure, that makes sense. Rod's nodding. Rob, do you have a question or discussion point? You're on mute.
If we, matter of discussion, if we find somebody with skills and page layout for the town report and web graphics, web layout, those are sort of a little bit more specialized skill. And so when those projects are done, the likelihood of that person wanting to stay on for half a day of putting out notices is probably pretty slim.
Right.
Yeah, I think that Rob's point is a good one. I think it speaks to hopefully we're going to find a person that's going to find the project challenging and interesting of putting the town report together. That's done.
Right.
We'll get a better sense. We'll be in a better place to say what our workload is like.
Right.
Apart from that. And,
right.
And they may not show huge interest in spending half a day a week, as Rob pointed out, posting stuff.
Right.
Right.
We might. Right. Thank you, Rob. Mary, did you have your hand up?
Well, yeah, I appreciate the discussion. I just want to be sure we know what we're voting on.
Yes, so back to that. So right now, the motion on the table is the motion that you made in our motion sheet, which is to request to authorize the town manager to write an advertisement and to accept and take it.
I understand that motion, but we've had, you know, several suggestions for amendments, and it didn't go through any process of voting them up or down. So
I believe procedurally there was Marcia had made a motion. Miranda, did you record it? And I didn't get a second on it.
Yeah, the through March.
Through March.
I thought Rob had seconded Marcia's motion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's just follow suit with my apologies. So Marcia had made a motion for a motion. Was that seconded? Do you have the note?
Yeah, so initially it
Mary
was
made the
through
motion.
the Callaway's amendment
Right.
was for through the completion of the town report.
That's right. And I didn't
by Gear.
It was in, so he had
Or
seconded.
He had seconded.
Okay,
yes.
so Gear had seconded. So
and then Brochu said through March 1st.
right.
So that's where it stands now, and there's been no second of that, I don't think.
Okay, so now we could amend. So Claudia is essentially amending the amendment. So
Which is a little confusing.
it's possible, though. I recently watched a meeting where they did this, so I think I got it. So Claudette's amendment was through March 1st. Right? So for Claudette's, with March 1st with the possibility of extension is what I believe her motion was. Is that right? Claudette, are you making
Through
that
March 1st, yep.
her amendment? Is there a second on that amendment? Okay, Rob seconded that amendment.
Great.
So now I believe I need to take a vote on that amendment.
Which one?
The amendment of the
The
So
second,
are we saying we are skipping over Marcia's amendment, which was moved and seconded? We're just skipping that and we're going to another amendment.
ended her amendment, so that's what we're voting on. Yes, you can say that we're skipping over if that helps with the understanding.
Shall I withdraw my motion?
Okay, that makes it clear for me. Thank you. All right.
Yep, I
Yeah.
got the fine.
Okay. So now what
Miranda, can you read the motion?
she was getting it ready for us.
Okay, so Roger, is that okay?
Please, thank you.
Okay. Is there, Layton moved to authorize the interim town manager to write the job description for a project coordinator and to solicit applications for the position. And then I think I should say, the term of which shall be.
And March 1st.
Yes, thank you. Term of which shall end March 1st, 2022, with the possibility of extension as needed.
Okay.
Mhm.
So now we can call the question. Okay.
Was that one seconded it?
Was.
By whom?
I believe it was Rob.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
About 20
Just trying to-
times.
Thanks.
Didn't want to go through sort of the full Robert's rules where we do all the amendments.
No, Roger, I just want to be clear it's happening. Sorry.
Okay, I appreciate it. It makes it easier for me, but you know, it's totally fine. I thank you so much. So like we have a motion, it's very clear. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you, unanimous.
That's great.
Okay, now we have an easy motion, I believe. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, seconded by Rob. In this little discussion space, I just want to offer so much thanks to Rod and Miranda. When I stopped by Tracy Hall to plan an agenda for all of your review, there's a really sort of all hands on deck, really positive energy, and that really is so really wonderful and encouraging. And I hope I want to actually say that publicly, so members of our public know sort of all the good work that is happening in that office, and then sort of all the offices that are around them, right? And some of the offices that they also then physically climb up to and also do other work in as well. So if anyone would like to say anything like that, I would appreciate it. I know these folks would, and then we could actually then take the vote.
Round of applause.
Yes.
Huzzah. No, you guys are doing great. Thank you so much for your work and for filling in under trying circumstances.
Very much.
Thank you.
And
Other duties as assigned.
Go ahead, Claudette.
And I just want to say, I think you can I was in Tracy Hall, I think it was Monday. And you can almost feel the positiveness.
Like
Despite-
energy. Positive
Yeah,
energy.
just despite the staffing issues. I mean, it just felt very positive. And meeting Fielding in person, meeting Mary in person, really positive. That office looks great now, despite the broken leg on the desk. The building, I think, just radiates positivity these days.
That's great.
Good to hear.
Yes, thank you, everyone. It's really lovely.
Okay, now, go ahead, Rob, I saw you on mute.
Well, I was just hoping we could capture that and put it in the advertisement for our town manager.
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you. That's it.
All of your work, and we'll call the question. All in favor of adjourning, please raise your hand. Okay, great. Until next week. Take care. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.